Hello, Beaver Nation, and welcome to Beaver Banter, an Oregonian Sports podcast. I'm Joe Freeman, and he's Nick Daschel. We work for the Oregonian, and we're here to talk all things Oregon State. Nicholas, how's it going, man?
Oh, just great. You know, it's kind of I want to say this is the easy part of the year, but as 2023 and 4 have proven, I'm not sure we have any downtime anymore. But it's a little bit easier now. The football is kind of on mothballs, and basketball's sort of winding down with the transfer portal, and it's all on you with baseball.
Yeah, it's a fun time of year for baseball. We got 2 weeks left in the regular season, then we got the Pac-12 tournament, and then everybody's favorite postseason. It's go time there.
Yeah.
Let's see. You know what? We're going to take a deep dive into baseball, Nick, which, like I said, has 6 games left in the regular season, but thought we'd throw you a curveball today and open with a little bit of hoops. Do you want to start with the men or the women?
Oh, we're calling Oregon State basketball oops. We're not calling
oops.
Just call it oops. Yeah.
Well, they're definitely a pair of programs reeling for different reasons. You want to go men first? Would you like to go women's hoops first? Where would you like to start?
Oh, I don't know. I guess the men probably better, just because there's more positive news out of the men than the women. But
all right. Well, after kind of a forgettable season and a roster that has been both decimated and flipped, let's get to men's hoops. You recently kind of talked extensively with Coach Wayne Tinkle, sort of detailed overhaul of the roster and kind of plucked his thoughts for what's going on. What say you about men's basketball?
One thing it's kind of weird. People have been, they've been pretty much down on men's basketball for quite a while for, good reason. They haven't won, and they've, it's just after that 21 run to the Elite Eight, it's been just a downer for 3 years. But I've got some, I've been getting some emails and messages from people, and they seem kind of upbeat about what Oregon State's added to the roster ever since the transfer portal kind of cleansed out what was left of last year's team. This one guy who's a big basketball fan, he goes, I can't believe that I'm beginning to think Oregon State men's basketball might have a better team than the women's team next year. He's not comparing the two as if they play each other, just the excitement toward what the men's team might have, going into next year than the women. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's starting to look like a real possibility, because they lost some good players. There's no doubt. Jordan Pope and Tyler Bilodeau are pretty good players. And they're going to Texas and UCLA, 2 teams that expect to be in the tournament every year, and they'll probably start for those teams. But what Oregon State has done is they've done what needs to happen in college basketball these days with the COVID year, the free year. The teams that win today are the older teams, the teams that got a lot of seniors and juniors. Oregon State's pivoted to a roster that's not freshmen and sophomores anymore, but a lot of upperclassmen. They got 3 transfers. I wrote 174 collective games they've had in college. Now, that doesn't mean anything in terms of, are they, did they play? Are they any good? One of them was a defensive player of the year in his conference. Another guy has started for a couple of years for a decent team. A post, Matthew Marsh has played 3 years for Wake Forest in a league that's got a lot of good posts, the ACC. I don't know. It's on paper, they look like they could be okay next year. They can make a run at 18, 20 wins, maybe. The WCC isn't the Pac-12, and I'm not saying the Pac-12 is great. The WCC is not a terrible conference. They have some good teams, but Oregon State's got a roster with some of the guys they got coming back and the new players they're adding. There's reason to believe they could be an 18 to 20 win team.
Well, one thing that's interesting about the move to WCC, obviously they lost players, I would assume because of NIL reasons and a shift from the Pac-12 to the WCC, kind of a combination of things there. I would think from an NIL standpoint, they would be able to compete at or above, most of the teams in the WCC. Wouldn't you think?
Oh, I mean, I thought with the team they had, on paper last year, they were going to be probably a top four team in the WCC because, I mean, the bottom three or four teams of the WC are usually not very good. The top end, Gonzaga and St. Mary's are usually usually top 25. And then there's always a team like a San Francisco or a Santa Clara that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see Washington State and Oregon State going in there and both finishing in the top five in the, in the WCC. They both have look like they both have good rosters. It's not. I mean, it's not the depth is not quite as good as it was in the Pac-12. So there's going to be some W's out there. So yeah, I mean, at this point, I think Oregon State just needs to win basketball games. It doesn't matter whether it's against Portland or Stanford. They just need to start winning some basketball games.
Yeah, it's hard to get, momentum with NIL, momentum with luring transfers and recruiting and all that when you've won 27 games in the last 3 seasons. I can't imagine, that really stirs the motivational juices there. It's at some point you got to show results. And as you well know, with your pulse on fans, the fan base is sort of punted on Tinkle a couple years ago, and I think at some level this was not a nail in the coffin for him, but most of the fans have kind of jumped ship on this team right now. So I don't know about momentum and all that. He's got his roster, right? I mean, like you said, he filled it with mostly vets.
Yeah, he's still got there's still at least one more spot to fill, and I mean, another thing they appear to be pivoting toward is international type players. The international players, you don't have to pay NIL money to. They're not eligible for it. I mean, at some point that'll probably change, but right now they're not eligible for NIL money. So they have several guys that are international type. So I guess that's a positive too, as long as they can play.
Yeah. Did you get a sense from him, and maybe you guys didn't go here, but like what style, how they will play, what the nucleus of the roster style wise?
Well, I don't think they're going to, I mean, I don't think he's going to change he's going to throw out his approach to, what he likes to do. But what this roster is able to do that they haven't had for a couple of years is guys that can post up and finish at the rim. They haven't had post up guys in a while. Casey Abekwe had some potential, but he had his hands were, I think half the time he dipped them in cement, and so he couldn't catch the ball. And Shoal Mariel just wasn't. He need he's just so fragile that he's hard to post up. They got guys. They got a couple guys now. They can get down low and really really do some damage inside. I mean, the guy from Wake Forest, Matthew Marsh, I mean, all he does is dunk. But, I mean, 2 years ago, he shot 88% from the field. I mean, that would have been an NCAA record if he'd had hit the minimum for field goals. I can't remember how much he missed by, but it wasn't that much. But, I mean, that's what he does. He dunks. And so they need a guy like that can, get some easy buckets inside. That's one thing. I mean, defensively, they could be better because – Tyler Cochran, the guard from Toledo, he was the MAC player, the defensive player of the year. The other guard they've got, DeMarco Minor. I mean, he's 6 foot tall, but he averaged 9 boards a game. He's thick and tough, and so those are a couple things that they'll have that maybe they haven't had in the backcourt in a while. Plus, they got some size too on the wing. They've got a couple of 6'7" guys that can play shooting guard and small forward, and they haven't had a lot of that, in a while either.
Okay. Well, you want to add anything else there, or should we shift over to women's basketball?
No, I mean, the only other thing I put in there is that Wayne told me that he and Dana Altman have agreed to a 4-year. They're going to play the next 4 years. They just have to figure out who's going to get the first home game. That they both want to play at home that first next year, and so they have to figure out who's going to do what. I don't know if it's going to come down to a coin flip or a drinking game or what, but something. But yeah, but they're going to play through the 27-28 year once a year.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I know there was some debate about that, or at least
Yeah.
confusion about that. So that's good news for all Oregon basketball fans. Not much good news going on with the women's basketball program right now. Of course, they lost nearly all of the roster, all the key pieces from last year's team that had an inspiring run to the Elite Eight. They just lost assistant coach Jonas Chatterton, who had been with the program for its incredible run over the last 10 years. I think about what's going on with this team. I mean, if I was a fan, I guess I think about, my Clementine's, my daughter's kindergarten teacher. Shout out Miss Eldridge Burns, who is a passionate Oregon State women's basketball fan and a WNBA fan. And her and her husband go to, as many games as they can. They went to the Pac-12 tournament because it was the last one, and I know she, lives and breathes basketball. And I can only imagine the status of her emotions over the since the tournament ended. You kind of felt like you had this group together that could do something very, very special next year. And then slowly, one by one, everybody hopped off the boat. So, it's odd to think that the men's basketball team, which has been such a disaster, has more momentum than the women's basketball team, which has been so incredible. So, I don't know where are you standing with that right now?
Well, a lot of unanswered questions out there. I mean, it's not like I haven't tried to get some answers, but I mean, nobody's really talked. I mean, when players leave, they go into the ether pretty much, and
Yeah.
I've tried to get Scott to talk any number of times, and he just doesn't want to talk right now, and I'm not going to say I can't blame him, but I don't know that the bunker mentality works these days. And eventually, people aren't going to forget. They're going to want answers. And, from what I've been able to gather from it, it was a combination of, NIL, the Power Five, not being able to play in the Pac-12 anymore because these players came to play in the Pac-12. It's the best,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the best. It's one of the top 2 conferences in women's basketball. And that's what they came here to play. And they no longer have that. I felt I got the impression that some of the players were not happy that things weren't communicated to them about this upcoming season because Scott wanted to keep the focus on the season during the season, and he didn't want to get into next year until the season was over. And whether that's a mistake, I don't know. I would like to find out what his thought was on it, but I haven't been able to get that yet. But anyway, 8 players have gone in the portal. 6 of them have moved on, officially moved on to new programs. At least 5 of the 8 are NCAA tournament type teams.
Mm-hmm.
The only 2 left are Perova and Martha Peach, and they're still in the portal. I suppose there's a chance they could come back, but I wouldn't anticipate that until they actually do it. So Oregon State's left with 5 players plus a player that they've landed in the that they've got from the portal. This player from Spain who played for your great Florida State Seminoles last year. So it's just unfortunate. I mean, it's pretty clear what has happened in college sports, that winning just doesn't matter anymore. It's about, what can you do for me? What's the best situation for me? It's not really about, it's really not about winning anymore, because if it was about winning, unless there's something we're not seeing from inside the program, I mean, this team was set to win and win big next year. And if that mattered, you would think most of these players would have stayed, but for whatever reason, they decided not to. Oregon State had plans to build a really good non-conference schedule for next year. There was plans to play a South Carolina, to play, some top 10 teams in non-conference play, and really, build a schedule that offset any issues with having to play in the WCC. But that apparently wasn't enough. So here we're back to square one again. And my thinking is, and no one said this to me, I just feel like this next year is going to be, they're going to get out of it what they can get out of it. And Scott's going to pivot, and he's going to come back with something that, fans will like to see in a couple of years. That the thing with Scott is he really digs deep into recruits, and having to pivot quickly and grab players out of the portal, it's just not quite his thing. He wants to build relationships and it's worked for him, and I'm not sure that getting players over a weekend and a cup of coffee and whatnot is going to it will work. But we'll see. He's going to have to do something. But I think in a year the 25-26 team, I'm betting is going to be pretty good.
Yeah, what comes to mind is something that I was thinking when you were talking about the men's basketball is like kind of a little bit of a pushback of the momentum they have is how much can you really accomplish with a completely overhauled roster in one season? Even if you infuse it with more talent, which I mean, I don't know the players that that Tinkle added, so I can't speak to the quality of the roster compared to last year. But it's kind of like this year's women's basketball team. It was nurtured over the course of years. It was built from the ground up after a disheartening stretch, and you were finally starting to see kind of the fruits of that labor, and now it's blown up. So I don't know what he can do for next season. He doesn't have a whole lot to sell beyond playing time. He loses his conference, obviously, and if I was a basketball player, I would wonder why this team blew up, why everybody left. Are there more reasons beyond the obvious? Which I'm not saying there are, but if I was a player being recruited, I would wonder about all that, I guess. And so, it's sad from the outside, and I'm certainly not a fan of the program beyond work capacity. It's disheartening and it's disappointing for fans, and you take the football gut punch with Damian Martinez and all that happened there and all the defections, and then you kind of add this on top of it, and it's just it's a brutal situation. There's really no other way to describe it, I guess.
Which is why fans are so not really sure what the word would be, but I want to say almost over the top about baseball right now, because that's the one thing they got to hang their hat on at Oregon State is baseball. And when things aren't going well, I mean, it just multiplies, because they want something, they desperately want something to hang their hat on. And, I guess we could kind of morph or, pivot into baseball here, but I was, I got to thinking with this, this team was kind of struggling a little bit at the plate, the road games, and yet this stretch here, this 7-game stretch, might be what the doctor ordered. They went to Washington State, Gonzaga, won 3 out of 4, got the bats going with that 9th inning at Washington State on Saturday. Went in the Sunday, really hit well Monday. They got a UCLA team coming in to Oregon State that just is horrible. And, it's one of those series that they should be able to just dominate. And so, if they can come out of the next weekend with a good winning 6 out of 7 games and winning a road series, that could give them some momentum going into, a stretch that they need with Arizona and the Pac-12 tournament. Because, I mean, if they could really finish strong and maybe even win the conference, let's say they go down to Arizona and do something, finish in the top 2-3 in the Pac-12 and maybe win the conference tournament, they can get a top 8 seed and not have to leave Goss for the NCAAs. I mean, it's sort of out there, but it just seemed like this stretch is what they needed because they were kind of, they had become kind of average for a while.
Yeah. Well, they really, I mean, the biggest kind of problem obviously was their offense. It had surprisingly, taken a, hit a cold spell. I think over the heading into, I want to say heading into Sunday's finale. It was either Saturday or Sunday's game at Washington State. They were averaging like four and a half runs and 6 hits in the last 9 games. And that just seems insane for the quality of the lineup and the talent that is up and down, the roster. So, but like you pointed out, it seemed like that 9th inning kind of just so short rally against Washington State really kind of spurred something, because including that inning, the last 19 innings, they've scored 37 runs, had 36 hits, and hit 12 home runs and 9 doubles during that stretch. So for whatever reason, that kind of shook them out of their funk a little bit. You kind of touched about where things stand, just kind of set the set the picture for everyone. We're recording this on Tuesday, May 7th, by the way. 6 regular season games left for the Beavers, and they are 2.5 games back in the Pac-12 standings. 3rd place behind first place Arizona, 2.5 back of them, and a half game back of second place Utah. Like you said, they host UCLA, the last place team in the conference, this weekend, and then they finish at Arizona. So in a way, they kind of control their own destiny. I want to say Arizona and Utah actually play this weekend. So at some level, if Oregon State takes care of its business, that should, create a 1 versus 2, or at least give them the chance to finish with a regular season championship. It's wild to think that right now we're even like debating whether or not they could be a top 8 seed, because, a month ago that was a foregone conclusion when they were a unanimous top 5 team in the country. But their road woes, their defensive woes, their bullpen issues, and then finally the nail in the coffin, the slumping offense kind of, sent them into a bit of a tailspin. And so, looking at today, D1 baseball had him as right on the bubble as a 9 seed. The RPI, Warren Nolan, I think, gosh, I had this up a little bit ago. They are 15th, so quite a bit down in RPI. And there's a lot of work to be done, obviously. And I think that they have a successful tournament that would really help them. But, what was once almost a given is now very much in jeopardy. So much will be determined over the next two weeks plus the tournament. But at some level, if they win the tournament, they control their own destiny. If they can win the tournament, if they can finish strong here and win the Pac-12 and win a couple games in the tournament, I think they're in good shape there. But what's crazy, man? You look at the poll, the national rankings, and it is just over flooding with SEC teams and ACC teams, which I want to say those two conferences make up 13 of the top 16 or 17 teams in the conference. It's or in the national rankings. It's crazy. Pac-12 has 3 teams in the top 25: Oregon State, and Arizona.
Yeah. I mean, it looks to me like on paper, if they could win 5 out of their next 6, that would mean winning 2 out of 3 in Arizona, which, isn't impossible. They could finish, in the top 2. It seems like that first or second seed in the Pac-12 sets you up pretty well, because don't you get if you're the 2 seed, you get the 5 and 8 seeds in the tournament you're
talking about the Pac-12 tournament, yeah,
in your pool. I mean, it just seems like you'd want to finish. Well, you want to finish in the top 3, because at least that gives you a chance, if you're in one of the top 2 get that that 4th team in the Friday in the semis, if you're happen to lose a pool game or something. So seems like finishing the top 3 is a big thing, but
Yeah, well, if you get a top 2 seed, you don't play on the first day. You would play on the second day, which I suppose doesn't hurt. And then yeah, I mean
Well, did they change the format this year?
it's pool play, so it's two games of pool play, and then they seed it accordingly based on how you do in that pool play. So it just so happens that the first 2 teams don't play on the first day of pool play. They would yeah.
No, but I guess what I was saying is if in the way it goes, the pool winners all advance to the semis, and then the next highest seeded team. Well, that's what I was saying. If you finish at the top 3, you got a better chance of getting that one extra. I guess in case you happen to lose a pool game or something. But I don't know. I just kind of think Oregon State can win 5 of these next 6. Win their pool at the Pac-12 tournament. I think they have a pretty good chance of getting, an 8 seed. I mean, it seems like playing at home for them would be a bigger advantage than a lot of teams, just because of the way they play at Goss. I mean, it just seems like it's a huge advantage for them.
Well, yeah, I mean, to reinforce that, they're 21-2 at home this season, which I haven't looked it up nationally how that stands, but it has to be, if not the best, among the best.
Yeah.
And then 10-2 in the conference at home. But conversely, they've really struggled on the road. They're 6-9. They got swept at USC, a 2-game. The finale was rained out, and they got stunningly swept at Cal, and that was kind of the first sign of things sort of hitting a lull. My read on why things they hit that stretch. First of all, that happens in almost every season. I didn't think it would happen offensively to this team just because it's so deep and loaded, up and down the lineup. But in a way, I think injuries finally just caught up to them. They've played the last 4 to 5 weeks, maybe more, without Trent Caraway. They, have played the bulk of the last month without Micah McDowell, who, man, he's battling that oblique thing. And I'm concerned that he may have re-aggravated that in Sunday's finale when it was either 2 or 3 hits, had a good game, because he didn't play on Monday. And I thought it looked like he might have sort of re-aggravated it, although he stayed in the game. So we'll have to keep our eye on that. Obviously Brady Casper came back and then from a long absence, and then he kind of, was scuffling there upon his return. Well, that's 3 starters of your lineup and 3 middle of the order players. And so, for the team to do what it's done, it's the only team in the conference that scored over 400 runs this season is remarkable. It really speaks to their depth. But between that and some pitching injuries, eventually it kind of catches up to you. And so I guess we should have expected some kind of lull at some point. But I guess the cliche goes, you'd rather them be in a funk, in April than in May and June. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I was wanting to maybe get your opinion on is the pitching. That seems to be the number one bone to pick for Beaver fans, is they want to fire Rich Dorman every other day, and I think they either lead the Pac-12 in ERA or close, or in there among the top 12 or 15 teams in the country at ERA. Not that that's that's the only measure of a pitching staff, but it's a place to start. Mm-hmm. And I guess the reason fans are upset is because they've blown a lot of games, late with their relievers. And I don't know, where do you think things stand with the bat, with the guys coming out of the pen for Oregon State here, going down the stretch?
Let me ask you a question, Nick. Let's play a little trivia. If I asked you how many teams in college baseball, in all of college baseball, have an ERA under 4, what would your guess be? No cheating. Don't look. Off the top of your head, how many teams in college baseball, 100, whatever it is, 118 or whatever it is, how many have an ERA under 4?
I'm going to say probably 4.
Oh, wow. You went low. 6. The answer is 6, which is pretty low. And so I think the Beavers are at, well, what are they? 4.22. That ranks 16th in the country. And that is, yeah, they lead the Pac.
That's after Gonzaga on Monday.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think the thing people tend to forget is these are college players. They're not professionals who spend every day, 8 hours a day working on their craft. They still got to go to school. They still got to, study. They still got, they're still 20-year-olds. They're not professionals. And so, I mean, they work hard at it, but it's not a full-time job yet for them. So,
Well, even beyond that, I mean, again, by comparison, the bullpen and the pitching staff is very good. We're talking about a systematic issue in the sport. There's only so many, pitchers, top level pitchers in the country, and I think the Beavers' frontline players in the bullpen. We're talking about Bridger Holmes, who's a candidate for Stopper of the Year. When you look at that funk they had, some of it was, inflated a bit by 3 pitches, 2 ninth inning home runs off Bridger, and he lost 3 games in a row. And 2 of those that just happened to come in conference games against Cal, could the worst kind of possible timing there. And so that inflated things and sent them, you flip 1 or 2 of those games and we're having a little bit of a different conversation. But otherwise, he's been dominant this season. So you're solid at the back end. Kyle Scott, who was supposed to be their closer, was injured for 6-8 weeks there. He's back, and he's been a little up and down, but he's a veteran that you have back there. And then Nelson Keljo has pitched very well the last 2 to 4 outings and seems to be, kind of becoming a person in the back end there that they can count on. So there are arms back there. It's when you get to that second and third level where they've run into trouble. We saw it last night with Morrell and, I'm spacing on who Hutchison hasn't been nearly as good this year as he was as a freshman. Ian Lawson, it was Keelan Oaks. Keelan Oaks struggled. So, we've seen that, but we've seen that across college baseball. It is the ball and the bats are back to being whatever is going on with them that makes offenses soar. So we're seeing an increase in offense over the last few seasons. And, between just a lack of depth across the sport and pitching and just a general, that's the way the sport is. That's what we're seeing. So, I get it. Fans are worried. They're filled with anxiety about their bullpen because it's a concern and there's no going away with that. I don't know. Rich Dorman has, just in his short time here, produced a first-round draft pick in Major League Baseball. Cooper Jerpy was like 2-6 as a sophomore, and then he was a National Pitcher of the Year the following year. So I think Rich has a little bit of a handle on what it is to be a pitching coach. He's obviously gotten other guys drafted as well. So, Aiden May got hurt, but he's having the best season of his career. Jake Kamatz has been a freshman, a full-time player for his 3 years here since a freshman. He's having a really good year under Rich's tutelage. So I don't know, man. Fans like to
Aiden May's last 2 starts, those are as good as they've had in a while, I think.
Yeah, and he's been both overpowering and clutch and emotional, and he's been everything that you want out of a frontline starter. And they didn't have that we missed a month. And then, coming back, he was on a pitch limit for several outings there. So, the whole point, and every time you talk to Mitch and anybody about Brady or Micah or Caraway or Aiden May or any of their 73 injured players, is we don't care so much about this week in April or this week in March. We want to be ready at the end. And so the whole thing is to build up for right now, these last 2 weeks that we've outlined, and then the stretch run. And,
that's why these next, 2-3 weeks are so key, because if they can win enough games to get in the top 8, their pitching I mean, you know better than I do, but I'm guessing their pitching is quite a bit better at Goss than it is on the road. And I mean, it's hard to believe that they're going to blow many games at Goss, just the way they seem to play there. So
Yeah, a low key one of the AJ Lattery getting hurt has really kind of hurt them in their their midweek kind of deal. And by the way, to your point, the Beavers ERA at home is 3.62 and it's 6.2 on or something on the road. So that kind of speaks to that. By the way, I think I said they were 6-9 on the road. I think they're actually 7-9 now. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, there's concerns when you go deep in the postseason and you have to get to that fourth, fifth guy that starts a game. But again, that's every team in the country, that when you get that deep in the rotation, that's just what it is. And
right.
as we've seen, 2017 was probably the best team in the country, and they didn't win a championship. So anything can happen in college baseball as much as any sport I think that exists. And so they're building up for the right time, I guess. We'll see what happens.
Well, I thought there was one other thing I was going to talk about with baseball, but I can't seem to think what it was. So
I guess the only thing I would bring up is hoping to get Trent Carraway tomorrow and to kind of get a handle on. I think he might be on the verge of returning, if not ready to return this week. We'll see. But he was supposed to be a middle of the order thumper, and he hasn't played for so long. And so when you think about his return, boy, that's almost like adding kind of a trade deadline guy in Major League Baseball for the stretch run. The other thing that I think we should probably mention is I have never seen, and even Gavin Turley last year, who had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, I don't know that I've ever seen a player mired in a bigger slump than Mason Guerra is right now. He's 0 for his last 41.
wow.
He hasn't had a hit since I think it's April 19th. He hit 2 homers against Cal, ended the game with 2 strikeouts, and hasn't had a hit since. Last night yesterday he struck out 4 times against Gonzaga. That's really, a potential problem, moving forward. He's a guy who's one of their biggest power hitters and one of their, in theory, one of their best guys in the lineup. So we'll have to monitor that. But
Wow,
that's rough. Yeah, that's rough.
That is a long one. I know what else I was going to ask. What do you think? So Bazan is obviously in the hunt for the Golden Spikes.
How did we get this far without talking about arguably the best player in the country?
Well, I was going to ask. So, what's the betting line on Travis winning the Golden Spikes award, being the best?
That's a good question. So there's the kid from Georgia who's got 9 million home runs, even more than him. Actually, let me look that up. I'm kind of curious how many he has. Excuse me, my voice is a bit off today. I would put him at he's got to be even money, right? He's right there. I would say top 1, 2, or 3. But the guy I was talking about was Charlie Connon with Georgia. Travis has 26 home runs. Well, Charlie's got 33. So he's and that's Travis has hit 5 in the last 2 games. So, that'll be interesting to see. But he's, Charlie's a sophomore. Travis is a junior. That probably is in his favor. He has absolutely rewritten the record book this year. I think Georgia kind of plays in a sandbox there, so you wonder if his numbers are a little inflated.
But they're playing against Major League Baseball pitching. It's the SEC.
Yeah, that's true.
How's he hit against Arkansas? Has he played Arkansas?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's a good question. But he has just been an absolute crusher all year. Let's see. How did he do against Arkansas? I can look that up real quick. This is maybe they still play Arkansas? Yeah, they haven't played Arkansas yet. So TBD.
Oh. So it's kind of down to those two.
I would say those are the 2 front runners. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't speak to, every guy across college baseball, and I don't pretend to. But those are the two guys that would jump off at the top of the list. I mean, I think he's a two-time all defensive player in the Pac-12. I assume he will be this year. Um, I would put my money on Travis, man. Just the way he's swinging it now, the way he's played all season. Uh, Oregon State is not a hitter's park. We all know this. It never has been, and to do what he's done so far, really. I mean, dude, I have never seen a season with worse weather. Every time there's a 70-degree day, they're on the road. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they were just in Washington State with horrible weather. They've been all over the place with horrible weather.
Okay, it's going to be 90 this weekend. So
yeah, it's going to be 80, 85. It's going to be great. Are you kidding me?
yeah, I mean, it's just set up for, balls flying out of the park.
Yeah, that's the thing. Historically, they get hotter when the weather gets better and all of that. And so, I think if I was a Beavers fan, I know that people have been filled with a bit of anxiety over the previous couple of weeks, rightfully so. And we haven't even talked about my personal biggest concern, which is defense, which has been very shaky, up and down, if not shaky this year. But again, the bullpen by comparison is very similar to others across college baseball. It's just whether or not they're throwing well when it matters most. The offense is coming around. If I was a fan, I would feel pretty encouraged right now where things stand. We'll see how that goes over the next 2 weeks, which, as we've talked about throughout this podcast, are pretty important.
I mean, I was going to say, I don't know that Beaver fans truly appreciate the era they've gone through these last, 7, 8 years. I mean, they've had 4 of the best players in college baseball the last 7, between, Luke Heimlich and Adley Rutschman and Cooper Jerpy and then Bazana this year. I mean, 4 of the very, very best in the game at Oregon State, a place that, you wouldn't think would just crank out, the best of the best, being in the Northwest and whatnot. So I just feel like that's something I can't think of a sport where that's happened at Oregon State, any sport where you've had a run like that of just greatness.
Yeah, and obviously, not to forget about Nick Madrigal and
Right,
yeah, and even Jacob Melton. He's the number 1 prospect in the Cardinals organization, number 1 or 2. I think number 1 in their organization. Is it Cardinals? God, I always mess that up. I'm pretty sure he's in the Cardinals organization. No, Astros. Sorry, Astros. He was a Pac-12 Player of the Year, 3 years ago. So he's kind of add him to that list. But yeah, you're right. I mean, and that's not even looking back to the Darwin Barneys and Jacoby Ellsbury's and such. But yeah, I mean, I think that's part of what goes into, Beavers fans are just an incredibly knowledgeable fan base. Everybody raves about the crowd. In part, it's kind of like the Blazers fans. They cheer at the right times and for the right things, and they really pay attention to the game. It does tend to lead to a little bit of, fanaticism. So they hyper focus on the negative a bit much for what I've been able to glean over the last few years. So, and it's
the closest thing we've got to SEC mentality is Oregon State baseball. They've won, they've tasted it, and
yeah,
the expectations are sometimes a little impossible.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen more hand-wringing over a team that's ranked number 7 in the country, features one of the best offenses in the country, that has survived 3-4 key injuries. Actually, more than that. That's just to the lineup. We forget that Aiden Jimenez has been out for the year, and he was supposed to be a very important piece of the pitching staff. But anyway, I don't know that I've ever seen more hand-wringing out of a fan base with a team that's so fun to watch and so talented. So that speaks to what you're talking about. It's sort of like, the expectations are so high. And, I think like you pointed out too earlier, a lot of it's even more intense this year just because of how negative and depressing so many other parts of the sports programs are right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. We're good. What do you think? You got anything else?
I mean, do people want to hear more than 45 minutes of us?
No. I don't want to hear us talk for 45 minutes.
No, you're supposed to sell it, Joe.
Yeah. Well, I'm undercutting it, so then we over deliver.
Right. Okay.
Undersell, over deliver.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. For Nick Daschel, I'm Joe Freeman. We will. Thanks for tuning in. We will talk to you again one day in the not too distant future. Enjoy these next this weekend series, and whatever happens with your basketball rosters. You said there's one more spot in the men's team they still need to fill.
One more on the men, probably 7 more on the women. So.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long summer for Oregon State women's basketball, putting the roster together. So.
A long, hot summer.
Yeah.
Stay tuned to OregonLive.com/Beavers for updates on that and more. And then, take care. We'll talk to you later.